All right. Good morning, everybody. Excited to provide a couple just quick welcoming remarks here before our panel on sports tech trends. My name is David Watkins. I'm the Senior Vice President of Entrepreneurship and Small Business at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, alongside our partners at Elevate Ventures. The IEDC is a founding host of Rally, and excited to welcome you here today. If this is your first time in Indiana, welcome. If you're from our vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem, we're also glad to have you today to talk about the future of sports technology. I would be remiss if I did not introduce a member of our extended IEDC team from the SportsTech HQ here in Indianapolis, Jeff Hintz. He is leading the charge to build a sports tech ecosystem with its capital here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Jeff, come on up to the stage.
All right, thank you, David. Just real quick before we get started. So Indiana took a bold step back in 1979 and formed the very first sports commission in the country. Now there's over 300 plus in the United States. And so that bold step created really the best sports community in the United States. We've been host to a number of world-class sporting events, including the Super Bowl, the NCAA Final Four, 8 of them, soon to be 10 on the men's side, 3 for the women, soon to be 4. The College Football National Championship game. We just had the USA swimming trials in an NFL football stadium for the first time in the history of that event. So we do sports really well here. We're also the home of USA Track and Field, USA Football, USA Gymnastics, the NCAA, the National Federation of High School Athletic Associations, the American College of Sports Medicine, 4 college conferences, the Colts, the Pacers, the Fever, and 10 other professional sports or leagues here. And recently, we've once again taken a bold step to our future. So back in 2019, we started a sports accelerator here with Techstars. We're entering the 6th year of that this fall. And then in 2021, we formed SportsTech HQ. SportsTech HQ is meant to build the sports tech ecosystem here in the state of Indiana, connecting with all those partners and those organizations. There's really no better place for a sports tech startup or an organization to locate here in Indiana. We can get them connected to early stage customers. Just ask the 30 plus companies that are in our collective now, 10 of which have joined us in just the last 12 months. So enough of the commercial. One last thing, if you know anybody that has a sports tech startup or a sports tech company and may be interested in growing that company, please have them reach out to us at SportsTech HQ. So I'm going to introduce the panel now. The panel is Sports Tech Trends, predicting the next big developments in the industry. So first, our panelists, the co-founder and CEO of the Sports Innovation Lab, Josh Walker. The Associate Athletic Director for Sports Performance at the University of Notre Dame, John Waggle. An investor at Marquee Ventures, Roshan Karavattuvithil. Did I get that? All right. And our moderator, the Vice President for Startup Partnerships and Head of Comcast NBCU Sports Tech, Jenna Karath.
Well, thank you. I think we're going to cover a number of really fascinating topics as we delve into sports tech trends. But I would love to start off. We got your titles, but tell us where you sit in that intersection of sports and technology. And since we just came off my 17 days of bliss, also known as the Olympics, would love your favorite Olympic moment from Paris.
Cool. So,
Roshan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can kick us off. So as mentioned, I'm Roshan. I co-run Marquee Ventures. We're an early stage VC fund anchored by the ownership group of the Chicago Cubs, based in Chicago. The intersection we sit at is early stage, which means for us, Series Seed, Series A, Series B, and we're less focused on just sports tech, but more so sports and sports adjacent. So that's sports, entertainment, commerce, media, and really anything that touches sports where we as the Cubs in the broader ecosystem can provide value.
Fantastic.
Oh, and then favorite Olympic moment, I would say probably Team USA basketball, Serbia semifinal to come back. I'd say that was pretty awesome.
Nice. Love that.
Well, hello everyone, I'm John. My role at Notre Dame is to really be the thread between a lot of our student athlete facing support services, so sports medicine, strength conditioning, sports psychology, nutrition, our Gold Center or student athlete support services that are leadership development, career development, and so technology for us helps me execute that coordination of efforts, right? So I can create a common language, I can create common tools, make their lives a little bit more efficient in how we're supporting our student athletes. So obviously technology and data are a really big part of what we do. And my favorite Olympic moment is just really seeing Simone Biles do some of the greatest things we've ever seen in gymnastics. I'm going to not get the statistic exactly right, but she's got 6 things named after her, and she's the only one on earth that's actually executed 5 of those 6. So just the greatness that you get to witness with Simone Biles is so rare, and so I really appreciated being able to watch that from my couch.
I agree. And her leadership was amazing as well.
Hi, everybody. Josh Walker, co-founder of the Sports Innovation Lab. We started the company 7 years ago now because sports is an industry for all the sex and the glitter of sports. It's really missing fan data. And if you hear anybody talk about some of the challenges of launching a startup in the sports space, it's largely because the teams have for a long time sort of outsourced their brand and not really collected a lot of information on who the consumer is. So we serve to fill that gap. We have spent the last 7 years of using venture capital money to build what we call the sports data cloud so that we can actually organize all the purchasing behavior of sports fans. So a lot of people look at what people click on, what they search on. We actually look at what they buy. And we study that over 3 to 5 years of a time frame so that you can see how sports fan behavior changes. Are they becoming a sports bettor? Are they a sport parent now because they're buying certain equipment, certain apps, things of that nature? So that's what our company does. That's the role we provide to the industry in terms of providing technology and data so that they can really personalize the experience, which we all know as sports fans we suffer from. Probably have watched 5,000 truck commercials during any sporting event, and maybe you're not in the market for a truck. We can do better. My favorite moments for the Olympics, I mean, I have so many, but I'll give you 2. One was the beach volleyball contest between the women's teams where they got all contentious and then they played John Lennon's Imagine. That was awesome. And I also love the surf picture where the guy was just captured in midair. That was almost undeniably AI, but it wasn't. So very cool.
There was a lot of speculation about that, but just epic time, place, wave,
Perfect.
The whole perfect dynamic. So one of the areas I really want to dive into first is really the consumption of sports, and the behavior around sports has changed so dramatically. I mean, you saw it even with the Olympics. Billions of minutes streamed on Peacock, 40% more than all the prior winter and summer games. So that consumption, that change has huge business implications. So when you think about that through the investment lens, how does that factor into the equation?
Yeah, it's interesting because so when you think about consumption, there's 2 things, right? You can consume it on television or you can go in stadium. For us as the baseball team and the Cubs, if you have fewer people buying tickets, that's less revenue. If you have fewer people in the stands, less revenue on food, beverage, merchandise. And then if you have fewer people in not coming to the stadium in general, you don't have as much money to spend on the actual players. And the players are ultimately what put on the best performance, which then again gets people in the stadium. And so it starts this vicious cycle. And so when we think about consumption, it's constantly thinking about ways to better enhance the fan engagement experience and getting them in the doors, because as much money as we make on the media rights side, we really need fans inside the stadium to make money off ticket sales, food, beverage, merchandise, and ultimately put the best team on the field because we're trying to win a World Series. So consumption and getting fans in the door is extremely important.
How do you think about that through the university lens, John?
I mean, I'm outside my lane here, but I'm gonna drift for a moment away from the health and performance space. But I think that things like virtual reality and augmented reality are really going to help with that consumption. Especially, I think about our geography in beautiful South Bend, Indiana, but it can be a challenging trip for people for a variety of reasons, and we have a worldwide fan base. And so figuring out ways that we can provide that experience in a digital environment or when they are on site, that we can really maximize their experience, I think are really important things that he's around here, but Ulander Wells Jr. is here, and he'd be a great person to pick his brain on. But that's the type of creative, innovative thought that we at least have to present within our environment.
Absolutely. I love what you said at the beginning. It's really about where are people spending their dollars and behavior? What are you seeing in all the work that you do?
Yeah, well, I think the way Roshan answered the question is the way that the traditional sports industry makes money. And so if you're a data company, you have to think about the way that teams operate and the way that they prioritize their business. It is about ticket sales, it's about media rights, and it's about sponsorship, but so many of these teams are also diversifying into other areas. They're buying their own RSNs as the RSN world continues to struggle with bankruptcy and things like that. They need to make sure that there's media distribution. The World Surf League is a great example. You can't buy media rights for the World Surf League because it's impossible to know when you can surf. So they had to pivot and zig and zag and do all of their distribution on Facebook and ways to get their media out there. I think the data that we look at is about fluid fandom, and we coined that term to describe the difference between the diehard fan and the future fan. So think about fluidity, right? Fluid fans are open to change. I bet all of you have seen new sporting events that you haven't seen before in the past because you're open to seeing something cool that you haven't seen before. Maybe it's an Australian breakdancer. You are empowered to choose. You're all sitting there with the phones in your hands. You could be watching ESPN or Comcast right now, and you wouldn't even need to listen to us. So you're empowered to choose, and then you're continuously evolving. The things John just mentioned about VR and AR, all those new products from Apple and Meta that are coming out, you're going to change your media consumption patterns. So you truly have to look at where fans are spending their time and money to understand where the future of sports is heading.
But going back to the cyclical piece that you talked about, it really starts in youth sports in a huge way. Because ultimately it comes down to what's the product on the field of play, the court, the ice. And youth sports is so important in sort of being that early predictor of what does the future look like. Typically, you play as a kid, you're a fan for life. You probably have a really interesting perspective on that too, as you think about Notre Dame and all that you've created there around that holistic student athlete.
Yeah, and I think the youth sports angle too is it's important to kind of hit pause, and the timing is not ideal being at a tech conference, but there's such an importance for the enjoyment of sport and the free play elements that are sometimes lost when these experiences are over-engineered or even at times even overfunded. And so I think in the youth sports space, and we're challenged with it too, to really reduce our tech stack, and that's not to diminish the importance of technology, it's actually to consolidate and eliminate the redundancy and to allow for still an organic sport development experience, and we're accountable to that as well. But I think more than any population of athlete, that child or that adolescent athlete, we have to be really disciplined in how we're deploying technology and find those opportunities to go 2 for 1 instead of 2 technologies involved in their development, figure out that one that really has a high ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's interesting too on, I often look at the Aspen Institute. They have their state of play, and it talks about sort of like what are the sports, and you're seeing more and more it's individual sports. You're seeing more and more of the social divide and parents that can put more money into the development. Would love your perspective on that, and Josh too, because that's very much sort of like where the investment is going into to be that indicator in the future.
Yeah, I think the key word is accessibility, and if you're a student of the sports tech industry, you go back about 7 years. That's when the consolidation really happened around all these registration platforms, and Comcast is an investor in a company called Sport Engine. NBC actually owns that now, but you have like TeamSnap, League Apps, they're all out there. And to John's point, like they've over monetized these things, and they actually operate and in a very frustrating way, almost like apps did in like 1999. As a parent, how many of you have to use these apps? Like, you have to use these apps. You want the kids' schedule, you want the kids, coach updates, you want the app on your phone, but my God, are you inundated with like these ads that just keep pummeling you? And that's like monetizing the parent, and we're losing the experience for the kid. And I get on the soapbox all the time on LinkedIn about this because it just frustrates the hell out of me. Not only are we charging too much for kids to pay to play, we're also putting technology into the marketplace that is designed to monetize the parent. And we're losing that entire joy of what it means to be a young kid playing, and that develops the talent pipeline for Notre Dame. So if we're really pushing those kids out of the ecosystem, it's a real detriment to the economy.
And Rosha, how do you think about that from an investment standpoint? I mean, youth sports is so fragmented.
Yep.
Is that an exciting place to try to play? You've seen some private equity kind of roll that up and try to take over that. Does that make you hopeful about that, and where can technology play a role?
Yeah, so when we think about youth sports, I think we think less about the actual kid when they're, and this is from the MLB baseball side, less about when the kids are younger playing as a fan. It's more so in the future, are they playing when they're kids so that they want to be a fan later on, and this gets back to the consumption side. And so there's a lot of cool companies figuring out different ways to engage the fan, because kids these days, and people may disagree, they're less focused on the actual team that they're a fan of and more focused on the individual players, right? And so figuring out ways to build that relationship better between a fan and a specific player like Dansby Swanson, that gets us really excited, because then you can kind of figure out different ways to bring them in the ballpark, do personalized experiences, different merch drops. So we think about youth sports as making sure they have the ways to participate in youth sports so that they stay a fan for life and they want to attend these games in the future.
Yeah, I don't think most people would disagree with that. I would think that our purchasing data actually supports what Roshan just said, which is like you see these kids buying jerseys or going to different ticketing events or buying apps or different collectibles from different athletes. That is, in definition, fluid fandom, right? That's the ability to like follow your favorite player no matter where they go. And I don't think they have that same generational fandom, which means they're going to be a diehard Cubs fan their entire life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We think about this a lot when we're choosing the companies for SportsTech, because we're trying to reach a very diverse demographic audience. It's not necessarily the lean back and enjoy the linear experience and however it's produced is how you consume it. It's really looking more at, how do you turn something that is linear into something that is not passive, but it's interactive, it's all of those things. Josh, you're nodding on this one. What are you seeing that you think is one of the more compelling tech trends when it comes to that interactivity?
I think it has to be around sports betting, which is depressing in some regards, but also really changing the entire industry. I mean, if you have kids that can play free-to-play fantasy sports, many people are like, oh, that's awful. It's an onboard to sports betting and gambling, and they don't know how to manage that. But if you look at what YouTube content is out there on just casino gaming and things like that, there is just a huge appetite for watching people get that rush of I just put everything on black and they go nuts and everything So there's this really interesting intersection between that rush and adrenaline and short form content that's happening on YouTube and on Instagram and TikTok and things like that with what sports betting offers, and then how the highlight economy is sort of developed, right? It's all those snippets of the great plays, so I don't have to watch the entire 3-hour and 50-minute baseball game. Even though the pitch clock has sped things up, the kids still want to see the home run, they want to see the stolen base, they want to see, and they want to consume that on an endless stream. So I hate when people are like, oh, they don't have attention. They'll watch an endless stream of baseball highlights for probably just as long as an older person will sit there and watch a linear baseball game. Mm-hmm. So I think the exciting part is understanding those consumption patterns and then figuring out how to monetize them in ethical ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about sports betting, and fantasy was certainly that gateway in, but all of the mixed use development that's around that, how do you guys think about that too? Because sports is that super aggregator, brings us together. It's those in real life experiences that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go. So I don't know who's been to Wrigley over the past 7 or 8 years, but completely changed. Still has the historic baseball feel, but we built up a huge entertainment district. And what we learned is that, and similar to these mixed-use projects, people, if they can't go into the stadium, they just want to be around it. You feel the atmosphere, you feel the vibe, you have the big screen where you can watch it, see everything that's happening live. And so I think we've seen more owners and teams try to build these mixed-use developments around their stadium, because even though they might only go to get one game a year, they can go to the entertainment district 5, 10, 20 times a year, just have dinner, have a beer. And that's also beneficial for youth sports, because a lot of people, they can't afford to go to a lot of games a year, have season tickets, but if they can just be around the environment, they still have that sports fandom. And so we really believe in the mixed-use projects and actually have a real estate development arm to specifically do that for other teams.
It's like the ultimate tailgate, John,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and we're no stranger to the mixed use. Our football stadium doubles as academic buildings, and credit to our former athletics director, Jack Swarbrick. It was called the Campus Crossroads Project, but our stadium is not something that sits idle January through July before we start practices. It's actually part of the lifeblood of campus, and I think if we kind of bring some of these ideas together with how you're creating not only the fluid fan, but the lifelong fan, by integrating the football stadium into the student experience and into the faculty experience, you're actually indirectly setting Notre Dame up for multiple generations of fanhood and community and connection. And so I think these though a little bit different in our setting, those mixed-use buildings are going to continue to push our boundaries, as well as we think about future facilities projects and is that reproducible with other things that we're thinking about on campus.
So much of what we've already talked about is it can't be lean back, passive, one-to-many. It's got to be more interactive, a one-to-one type relationship. So that hyper-personalization, it's on everybody's product roadmap of how you do that well. I think we took our first stab with Comcast and NBCU with AI Al Michaels and being able to pick the 3 sports that you wanted highlights from, but you were kind of beholden to those 3 sports. So when you think about hyper-personalization and a one-to-one relationship, maybe Josh, I'll start with you. Where do you see the breakthrough trends there?
It's just incredibly self-serving for me to say this, but it's with the data. I mean, if you don't have the data, if you don't understand what the fans care about, you can't put the right things in front of them at the right time. This industry is just at least a decade behind most other industries when it comes to that. And again, I didn't come into sports with the assumption that it would be that way. I kind of learned that by working with the teams, with the leagues, and trying to understand why would it be that they don't know anything about their fans? And then you start thinking about it, well, the Ticketmaster and StubHub and SeatGeek have their ticketing data. Aramark and Legends and Levi have their concessions data. Fanatics and New Era and Lids have their merchandise data. Well, they don't have the fan data. So this idea of having first-party data collection, and you heard it in the keynote this morning, the idea of getting consent-based data that's organized correctly is a multi-year process. Mm-hmm. So we have tried to accelerate that by saying, we know it's going to take you years to do it. You should continue to do it, but in the meantime, we can provide you with a really good data cloud to kind of get you on the path to sort of doing that personalization. And then where you plug it in depends on where you sit in the ecosystem. Roshan and the Cubs will probably use it for personalization and to identify the right sponsors. The media guys will probably use it to make sure that the right ads are on connected TVs or on linear. And then, of course, everybody's going to use it for digital, right? Programmatic advertising is the cheapest way to put the right thing in front of the right person at the right time. So you need the rails of LiveRamp and Trade Desk and all those programmatic things behind the scenes. We've worked really hard just to make that super easy for people. And I think personalization will change the way that people consume sports. They won't have to choose between Al Michaels and other alt streams. They will have the right stream delivered to them.
And I think from our space, it's changing the way we even play sports. Coming from baseball, the player development revolution really that happened there that took over hitting and pitching both. And to your point, it took data. It took pooling a lot of different data sources into a single place and building models that helped us better understand who that player was and then who that player could be. And now as we look at college sports, it's no different.
Sometimes we have to say it's Moneyball for marketing in sports, and people are like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the first revolution that happened in sports. It was Billy Beane. It was the, figuring out what their yield was, how often they could play, how much sleep they needed. That was John's world before it became a marketer's problem.
Yeah, and I think that's where now we're able to, that the data ecosystem is there, you're able to leverage things like AI to make your decisions faster, more efficient, especially the kind of low cognitive threshold decisions, that taking those off the table for practitioners in my space in injury prevention and mental health and designing diet plans and things like that. Sometimes those are really complicated and require that personal touch, but sometimes it's an adjustment to protein intake that can be something that, using our data and using some of these AI tools, we can actually get a little bit faster, get a little bit more efficient to personalize things more, at least quasi-personalize. We can get a little bit closer than you are just waiting on your meeting with the dietitian or your meeting with the strength conditioning coach. Like it can be a little bit more streamlined with some of the new tools out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh kind of speculated, using some of that data, understanding what sponsors want, but what are some of the other surprising areas where hyper-personalization you think will unlock new revenue or just unleash efficiencies that will help that ecosystem?
Yeah, going back to the data, it's not all there yet. I think he's right. We're definitely 10 years behind. But eventually, when all the data sources can talk to each other, you should be able to realize that, hey, when it's 90 degrees out in the bleachers, we see a lack of people who are 45 plus buying tickets. But when we do a giveaway, the people 45 plus love those. We should be able to find a partner and say, hey, people 45 plus are drinking X brand, let's do a bobblehead with John Lester and tie it towards whatever brand they're drinking. And it should be able to get them in the door. And so if you can tie the ticket sales to merch, to F&B, to demographics, you should be able to adjust the sponsors who can play with you in that scenario and bring those fans back in the stadium. Because it is crazy when you do simple things like a bobblehead or a mesh tank giveaway. It's crazy what the fans will do to be one of the first 10,000 ticket buyers. So I think by using the data, we can get more so towards that kind of hyper-personalization.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, when you think about older technology, it was sort of like shooting the t-shirts out of the gun. It's like all of those sort of fun, surprising moments, absolutely. One of the other areas, now we're really getting into the space of sports is now being set aside as its own asset class. Huge investments. You are sort of investing in a generational type of a season, growth, player, all of these things. Roshan, I would love to start with you. How do you think about that in terms of, all right, what are the bets to place 5 to 10 years out? What are those big trends that all of the change that's happening now is leading you to say directionally, these are going to be the big trends in 5 years?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch. One we specifically like is focusing on this youth fan and how we can make sure they'll still be a fan by the time they get older. And so there's one cool company we're not investors in, but they put NFC chips into a variety of different things. So you can start to gamify things for younger fans and bring them into the stadium. So you can say, hey, if you buy a Cubs hat, you attend 2 games at Wrigley, and you attend 1 game at Busch Stadium in enemy territory, you now get entered to meet Dansby Swanson. Stuff like that gets people really going. And so I think that's one place where we're really focused on, is kind of engaging that fan in a unique way and think of experiences that haven't been done before to really bring them in. So yes, we're very bullish on sports. And then just to your point of the sports as an asset class, I think we're all here and we're all listening to this talk because we firmly believe in sports moving forward. It truly is just the glue that brings us together. And so that's why I think everyone's so excited about it, because 10, 20 years from now, sports will still be here, and I think it'll be more popular than ever.
We're going to make sure we introduce you to Zatap. We invested in them in this current cohort for that same thing, like building off merchandise and then being able to have a digital experience that builds off of it. It's almost like a Rolex that adds in value, but that is a gateway to Yes, the credit card doesn't necessarily mean that's the person wearing the hat that wants to have a invite to a gaming experience or things like that. It's a gateway to that one-to-one relationship. So love that.
And I think we may be headed towards kind of a great consolidation in a sense. I mentioned it earlier that there's maybe these opportunities to reduce a tech stack or make a user experience more efficient. And I think there's a ton of devices out there that measure quality X really well in my space. And but right now, if I were going to string together 5 different metrics of importance for us, that might take 5 different devices. And so, especially when we look at wearables and we look at some of those things that are more integrated into the equipment of an athlete, I do think there's going to be a push towards devices that do multiple things pretty well, and then multiple things really well eventually. But that's going to be at a premium. And even if I take the lens of our practitioners that are more athlete facing, it gives them fewer things to manage as well. So I think from the athlete experience, from the practitioner experience, you're having a lot of enhancements that will come to fruition from a consolidation of sorts.
I would say that, look, selfishly, I think any technology that can solve what I would call the loneliness problem. And I'll give you 2 examples. One, from a broadcast perspective, most adults, if they're home alone and they're want to go out, they'll sit at a bar and they'll go watch the game with a bunch of strangers. That watch together technology that I think Comcast and others are working on is allowing you to watch with a bunch of people simultaneously, but still be in your living room. I think that's really, really powerful, and somebody's going to definitely crack that code, and it's going to be awesome. And I think the discoverability for kids is also really powerful. I don't know that new technology needs to be built, because Snap does this really well. They have location finder so you can see where your friends are, but that should be designed for pickup games. Right? So if I'm sitting at home and I'm bored out of my mind in the middle of the summer and I want to go play hoops, well, my buddies are out of town, they're at camp, where can I find a pickup game? I think those sort of location finders can be purpose-built for youth sports and really sort of scratch an itch. And the last thing I'll say is I don't invest in companies because I run a company, so I try to remain objective. The only company I have invested in the last 7 years is a company called Hoop, H-U-U-P-E. And they do the smart backboard. And the reason I invested in them was because during the pandemic, my kid was going nuts. Literally outside shooting hoops all the time by himself. This backboard lets him compete against pro athletes, college athletes, but also kids from around the world. So going back to my John Lennon earlier comment, imagine a future where he's playing shootout with some kid in Taiwan or somewhere else. They don't speak the same language, but they're both trying to beat each other on a smart backboard. I love that kind of stuff.
Oh, Zwift is the exact same experience. Yep. To be able to ride in virtual worlds, but join races. We'll have meetups on Zwift with people we used to ride with in LA.
I love it.
It is, and it's in that world that can be virtual, but can also bring you right back into the real life.
Yeah, and don't underestimate how much of this world is lonely and wants that connection through things they're passionate about.
Well, where's the one place that we can all come together? We can scream, we can cry, we can yell.
Sports,
it's totally acceptable. It's sports, and if you're not doing it, you're probably not a fan.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that we carved out time for audience questions as well. So who wants to jump in and ask a question? We'll take you in the back, and then.
Do the microphone.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Hi. So the current rule changes in baseball. I'm a Tigers fan right now, and the Tigers have 2 healthy starting pitchers. So they're doing bullpen games pretty much all the time. And they've had this for about a month now, and they have the best ERA in baseball. So looking at the current pitching trends with injuries and the Manfred rule that he's talking about with the 6-inning limit, how does this connect to sort of that youth connection to a player or just like sports consumption in general? And how do you think this like impacts baseball and the consumption landscape in the future?
With like the pitch clock and stuff like that.
More in terms of like how pitchers nowadays, like the whole focus is on swing and miss as the shift rules have gone away, so people can't shift as much anymore. So pitchers are getting swing and miss, and this is causing a ton of pitching injuries. And yeah, also just like the focus on offense and how this is kind of deteriorating the role of the starting pitcher who goes long innings, like a Kyle Hendricks, and that as that's dying, how does that relate to making pitchers marketable?
So I won't sit up here and say I evaluate baseball players, so it might not be the best answer, not my specific job. But I will say, if it were up to me, I love going to a game where it's a pitching duel, and I don't want to be able to pull a pitcher out after 6 innings if they're throwing a no-hitter or even a few hits. And so for me, I think whenever I get the MLB app saying, "Hey, XYZ pitchers through 7 innings, no hit," that's awesome, and I'm going to turn on that TV. So if I were, I want to be very careful what I say here, but I thoroughly enjoy seeing pitchers duel, and I don't think we should be able to pull them out after 6 innings and feel like they should go as long as the team thinks they need to be. So yeah, not the best answer because I'm not on the baseball ops side, but I think pitchers should be able to go as long as they can, especially in a good game.
So let's take a moment, though, on the games are shorter now.
Yep.
Some of those rule changes, I'm sure there was consternation about, what's going to be the impact to food and merchandise and beverages and all of that. Have we seen a decline? Because I think I've heard it's actually been an improvement with a shorter game and fan attendance has gone up.
It's been pretty funny. So we originally thought there was going to be a decline in food and bev revenue because the pitch clock is shaved almost 30 minutes off of each game, and they go by quick. But because fans are aware that the game is going quicker, they actually eat and drink more faster, and so it's actually
I
been.
don't know why that's surprising.
And
the teams are getting smarter about this too. They're also using access control technologies to get your beer preference. So that when you walk in, the Cleveland Browns do this, I think. When you walk in, if you have an easy pass sort of thing, they'll give you a beer as you walk in the stadium. They're like, "Here, let's get you going quick. Here we go." Yeah, I think people are getting pretty good about this.
And some stadiums have the Amazon Go technology where you don't have to wait in line for 10, 20, sometimes 30 minutes to get a beer. You walk in, get your beer, and you're out. It's quick.
But your question might have something else, and again, I don't know how academic you want to get about this, but you are at the core of a lot of problems with fandom right now, which is there are the traditionalists and then there's the people that just want to see something new and everything else. So there's a lot of tension between could these pitchers today compete with the pitchers of the past? You see that with the kickoff rules and all these things that are changing. It makes it harder to be a fan and compare and have those debates that are usually happening at the bar and, over a drink.
Oh, yes, you were next.
How you doing? Rodrigo Castro with Multiply Technology. One thing I didn't hear up there is in the name, image, and likeness space. I just want to hear your thoughts. It could be for anybody, but how that's changing collegiate sports and also moving into professional sports as well.
You should come back at 3 o'clock and hear the gentleman who I now am noticing is right in front of you on his panel. He's our expert there, but the comment I'll make is, we're putting a lot of people resources and intellectual firepower and financial resources into this space to be as competitive as anybody, and we still believe that combined with how special of an experience Notre Dame is as a student and as an athlete puts us in a really, really great place. But if you want to get into the nitty-gritty with that, you'll have to wait a few hours and come back and hear Ulander.
So the misnomer is that, or the misconception is that it's helping youth and amateur athletes. There's not a chance. Those deals are way too small, way too fragmented, not happening for a while. It will impact programs like Notre Dame where there is recruiting and there are promises that are made based on how much you can make as income as you become an athlete at their program, and that with the transfer portal and everything else, legit. The silver lining, the really nice place, is where it's happening in women's sports, where the women's sports have benefited enormously because the young amateur female athletes are much more digitally savvy than the male athletes, and that is preparing them to build a social following that they can bring into the pro or the college level. And I think that that is absolutely improved visibility for the game.
You've actually talked about that before, of like that women also tend to gravitate to causes. So female athletes that are being authentic about that, being able to share that. From a Comcast perspective, we have invested in helping not just the 90, the 1% that's going to get the big name, image, likeness deal, but the 99%, and really creating a trusted platform for the NBC Athlete Direct so that local advertisers can really find an authentic, true hometown hero in a given sport that reflects on their brand, and it could be a trusted, vetted space. As a former student athlete, like I came up in that era where they were handing out credit card applications for everything, and you could have really damaged your credit before you finished getting your degree if you didn't have sort of some sensibility around that. So that platform is really to help students do it in a way that helps them build in an authentic way and protects them throughout that process.
And it feels so novel too. The other thing I would add, but these are commonplace in professional sports. Even our students have all the freedoms to pursue monetization of their name, image, likeness, and ideas. And there's a lot of best practices that we can take from and learn from and apply. We're not going to be able to go apples to apples with everything, but I think with the newness and with some of the other very public discourse going on within college athletics, that the sense of novelty is overwhelming, and rightfully so, but there's some life rafts out there that we can say, okay, what can we learn from professional sports? What can we learn from entrepreneurs? And what can we learn from some of these other spaces that do have some transferability there?
Absolutely.
You going? Adam and Adam at FanFest. One more question for the Cubs. So, in a bid to drive up ticket attendance and live stadium attendance, have you seen any great use cases, examples of using, either at the Cubs or across baseball or other sports, of using some kind of companion digital experience, either pre-game, before coming, or after the game, unlocked after attendance? Whether it be gamification, interactive content, that has actually worked and drove increased attendance with new demographics, younger demographics, et cetera?
We have not personally, nor have I talked to anyone across the league. I'm sure it might be happening in a few teams, but we haven't personally. I think the NFC thing I was talking about is potentially the future, because a lot of these clubs don't have loyalty programs, and I think that's what will get people back in the door. So I'm really excited to see where that company goes, because I truly think if you can gamify and incentivize them to not only interact with the team on in person, but at the merch store in a different city, I think that'll really change the trajectory of like how these people kind of come back more often. They're called End State. End State, yeah.
All right, we have one person that can take us out. Final question.
Oh, I'm closing this bad boy down.
That's right, because you got a 1 minute and 10
I heard
seconds.
you present. You're going to definitely close us down.
Thank you. So, Dr. Jen Fry, so a question for all you all. RIP the Pac-12, right? We got to give them their dues. Do we think that the Pac-12 will be coming back? At any point, Josh, you know my friend JP, so I'm very familiar with ND. Do we think the Pac-12 is going to come back? What do we think that this means for the Power Fours, for kind of this revenue generation, all this stuff that's going on? So what do we think is going to happen, if you could say, in 5 years with the Pac-12, with the Stanford and Cal having to go across the country? What do we
Is this
think?
one of these questions you're not supposed to answer?
Yeah, well, I'm actually thinking, all right, how can I kick the can down the road
You're
for
like
this last
25
seconds?
Where'd you get your shoes? Those are nice shoes.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think that conference realignment has been, one of the most newsworthy things over the past couple of years. I think we're all even just kind of hoping for that to settle a little bit, and I think it will now that some of the media rights things have shaken out. But from Notre Dame's perspective, our independence has never been more valuable. So, and I'm stealing that soundbite from our athletic director, Pete Bavacqua, so I hope he doesn't mind. But that's really what excites us, is that we can, regardless of how the leagues shake out, like we can navigate this space and have really competitive, regional friendly, travel friendly competitions for all of our 26 teams. And that's where we've got to stay focused. But it's obviously,
I don't know why you thought you'd get another answer. I mean,
it's sad.
Look, there's a lot of sports out there. There's way too much competition now. You got Savannah Bananas, you've got Athletes Unlimited, you've got the unrivaled new basketball league. There's so much media out there. These conferences have to consolidate to drive up their media rights, and that's going to continue to happen. It's not going to go the other way.
I will say it's a great marketing lesson. Unrivaled, that can scale, but don't put a number in what you title something. It will cap you at some point in time. So with that, I do want to make sure there's another number that's very important, which is from 2 to 3, and then from 3 to 4. Our 10 companies that are in our current cohort of our sports tech program are doing 7-minute pitches, live demos of their products, talking about the business outcomes and what they accomplished with our sports partners across Comcast, NBCU, Notre Dame.
They're legit, so come check them out.
Great.
Check them out. Carve out the time for it. Thank you very much. Hopefully you all walked away with a better sense of this ever-evolving world.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.